and Audacity in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, and welcome back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we're going to discuss how to be a good client.
It sounds like how to be a good dog, like how to obey.
Yeah.
But I promise that's not what we're going to be talking about. But I'm actually pretty excited for this conversation today because I feel like in the past couple of weeks, I've had like a number of encounters that have actually spoken to a lot of the things we're going to talk about. And I know like right before we got on, Christina was dealing with something with a client as well, that kind of spoke to this too. So why don't you kick us off with that, and I'll kind of get into some of my examples, and then we'll break some stuff down.
Yeah. So I had a client literally while we were chatting and talking about everything we were going to talk about, sent me an email, and she was like, "Hey, I'm having some issues with my IUD. It's kind of out of place. I'm having a lot of pain, a lot of cramping, and I'm trying to figure out if I should work out or not. Like, can you please help me with this?" And so she's a brand new client. And I, responded back to her and I was like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for reaching out and letting me know what's going on, because I guess we'll get into this. Like, we can't help you if we don't know what you're dealing with, what you're experiencing. So in my opinion, I think being over communicative and letting us know more than not enough, I think is best. But I said, yeah, absolutely. I was like, there are definitely times when we need to push through workouts. And if we're feeling lazy or unmotivated or just tired, then yeah, I think those are definitely times I'd be like, yeah, you need to go work out. But if you're in a lot of pain and you are sick, working out can actually do more harm than good. So that's what I told her. I was like, hey, rest up, take time off. 2 days off from the gym is not going to ruin your progress. Like, focus on getting better, going to your appointment, and then we'll talk again. So that was kind of my experience right before we jumped on this podcast.
Yeah. So definitely I will emphasize, communication for every client, including myself. And so like to give kind of a little bit of a personal update, I had an interesting turn of events today, actually. So I have been cutting, as you guys know. This is going to come out not next week, but the week after. So it'll be a little bit delayed, but still relevant. So I was cutting for about 12 weeks, and we were planning on extending it for one more, just because the timing worked out for, reverse dieting a little bit before we went on some trips. But I was just really struggling with like the whole is it worth it sort of thing, because I've been feeling really good with the results that I've gotten. I've been feeling pretty lean, to be honest, and I've been feeling the effects of dieting like really, really hard. And so I brought all of those things to my coach's attention, and I was like, I don't want to tell him because I know he's probably just going to be like, let's reverse now. Like, let's just, call it while we're good, and while you're on a high note. And while that's all good and fine, I was like, but I really just want to finish what I started, and like I don't want to give up or seem like I don't have it in me or whatever. And I just felt like kind of just nervous to bring it up, but I did. And I titled my video, because I sometimes send my coach video check-ins instead of written ones, because it's just easier for me to talk. And I titled it, I'm being a girl right now and overthinking everything. Please help. And I sent it over, and he actually like really came through with the response that I needed. And it was essentially, hey, look, you're on a high note right now. You hit a low weigh-in this morning. You lost 1.3 pounds on average this week. This cut has gone amazing for you, and it's probably been the quickest that you've lost. And I would much rather end on a high note this week versus you feeling the effects of dieting so hard, maybe giving into temptation over the weekend, having your weight spike up, and then next week having the cut end on a negative note. And so let's start the reverse now. And I actually had that, all my protocols changed and everything like that. So I actually feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty relieved, because I knew part of me wanted to reverse now, because I just didn't see the benefit of one more week. Spoiler alert, if you didn't know this, not a lot of change in your physique can happen in 7 days, especially when you're already lean. So like there wasn't much else I could do. So I think this was the right move. But I mean, even for us, even for me, like communication is huge. And I could have just said, good week, lost weight, ready for the last one, and just seen what happened. But, now we're not leaving it up to chance because I communicated. So I was really happy with that.
Sounds like you have a good coach.
Yes. And looks like I was a good client.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think that that takes us into some good behavior of a client and letting your coach know what you're struggling with. Because again, if Marissa had just said, hey, like, great week, like, I don't know, that's it. See you next week. Brandon would have no idea what she was struggling with internally in all of these thoughts. And so he'd be like, okay, yeah, sounds like she's doing great. Like, let's do another week of the cut. And then Marissa has this downward spiral over the weekend and then is super frustrated with what happened, but he had no idea. So Marissa communicated everything that she was talking about, because your coach is not there to just like pat you on the back and tell you you're doing a good job and to keep things up. We're here to help you troubleshoot. So if there is something that you're struggling with, that's what we want to help you with. So we're not just cheerleaders. And, I think that sometimes, I'm going over like a ton of these things right now, but, not just checking in when things are going well. And I have some clients who will be like, hey, Christy, like I'm having a really bad week. Like, can I check in with you next week? And like, first of all, it is good that they're letting me know and they're talking to me about it. But that's always when I say like, hey, like this is where I'm supposed to help you the most. Like it's easy as a coach to just be like, yay, good job. Like, see you next week. But we're here to help you troubleshoot and figure things out if things are not going well for you.
Yeah. And I think that really speaks to something that I say to a lot of my clients is like, you're literally paying me good money to help you with your issues. So I almost don't want you to be perfect. Like, not to be like, I want you to fail. Like, obviously, I don't want anyone to fail. I want everyone to succeed. But like, if you don't run into issues, then what did we learn?
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't learn anything in that circumstance. So in all honesty, like I want my clients to be hitting, roadblocks or struggling with something internally and then communicating that because, I think one big umbrella we can put over a bunch of the things that you just listed are what clients think is good behavior, good in quotations, because it's actually counterproductive to the practice of coaching. And so, like you said, it's like we're here for those times when you're at your lowest, when you're struggling the most. And I know for me, it was like, I was just so over dieting this past week and I have to dig pretty hard to lose weight. And so my numbers were really low. And I found myself like taking little bites of things that I shouldn't, not tracking them. And like I've actually been getting away with it. Like in all honesty, my body's been kind of forgiving this past week and I've been hitting some lows still, despite that quote unquote misbehavior. But I know that if I had just tried to push on and push on and push on, I probably would have had a bigger episode of messing up coming soon that I kind of just didn't want to deal with or face. So this kind of mitigates that problem by being done with dieting earlier. But yeah, I mean, so a couple of things you said were, quote unquote, good behavior that we think we want to exhibit as clients. And I can speak as client and as coach
Mm-hmm.
is, turning in a good report card. And I call this the report card mindset, but basically, we have a lot of forms that we want our clients to fill out. If you worked with any kind of coach, you have to fill in something or report some kind of data in order for the coach to make decisions for you. So it almost sometimes feels like you're filling out a report card. And if it's not perfect or if it's not really, really good, then you're a failure and you're a disappointment because you have to fill in these numbers and this data. But ultimately what that leads to is either the client will lie about
Mm-hmm.
what they did for the past week, and I've had that happen before where someone would fill in, oh, I hit my macros perfectly every single day, when in reality they were actually binging a couple of times per week, but they didn't want to admit it. And they basically wanted to turn in that perfect report card, get like a good cheer from me back, and just try to figure it out on their own. But again, that's not the role of the coach. The role of the coach is to intervene and actually ask the right questions and change things appropriately so the person can thrive.
Yeah, agreed. And so I think it's hard, and like, and then the other thing too is I'll have some clients who are like, oh my gosh, I had such a bad week, like, here are my numbers, here's my macro log, and I'll look at it and be like, okay, like, yeah, you might have like underate or overate this one day, and you were actually like pretty spot on for the other 6 days of the week, and your average, was not far off. And, the other thing, I'm like, hey, you had all this stuff going on in your life, but you were still able to get all your workouts in. So the other thing too, it's like you might have this perception of having a bad week, and then your coach is there to kind of point out all the good things that you did too. Because, and it is very tough being a coach, because you need to find that balance between being hard on your clients and pushing them and challenging them to do better, but at the same time being like, hey, you need to give yourself some grace. Like, you had a really tough week. Like, I don't even know how you were able to, you were in and out of the ER with your dog, and your kids had to go to urgent care, and like, how did you even have time to like sleep? So pointing all those things out can be really helpful, because, and I think what happens with a lot of clients is that they were going through this on their own. They have a different perception of what is actually happening. So it's nice to have someone say, like, no, you're doing a good job, keep it up. Because sometimes they'll be like, well, I just can't do this, I'm a failure, and they quit. And so it's really nice having that type of accountability and someone that can hold you and kind of give you that motivation to keep going.
Yeah, it's funny that you use those examples because I actually had a client this past week have to take their cat to the ER. And that was like a hallmark of their week. And that client specifically still lost, I believe it was 1.5 pounds on average for that week, and was pretty spot on with almost everything. And exactly as you said, negative perception of the week because of the emotional stressors, and wasn't able to appreciate the wins that they had.
Mhm.
And I also had a client check in today, literally before this, who she had a migraine for 5 days straight
Oh,
and still made it through 2.5 of 3 of her workouts. And she PR'd on almost everything that she touched. And I was like, can we just like celebrate this for a second? Because that's incredible. And I'm telling you right now, if I had a migraine like that, because like I don't get migraines, I would not be able to do what she did. And
yeah.
so as a beginner too, a lot of these people that we're working with are not really experienced. They're more new to this. They're learning resistance training for the first time. And the fact that they still got themselves in to do that, or maybe still kept their diet in check, like that's an even bigger win than to someone who's like a veteran like us.
Yeah. And so I think we talked a lot about growth mindset the last podcast. So this will be in 2 weeks. So 2 podcasts ago. So I am a huge proponent again on growth mindset, and we don't fail. There are no failures. It's just learning experiences. So one of my intake questions for my check-ins is like, what were some things that did not go so well this week? But it's like I followed it up with, what did you learn? Like, what can you do better next time? And so that's what it is. It's like, I do want my clients to progress every single week and to build off of their foundation. So by the end of our time together, they have all these things that are already set in place and they're really good. But, it's like, okay, I didn't get my water in, or I didn't hit my macros when I had to go to the ER for my cats. Like, what did you learn? Like, well, I learned that maybe I should carry snacks with me in my purse. Maybe I should carry a gallon of water with me, so I have access to my water and have access to this. So it's like, yes, you had this experience and it wasn't great, but how can we turn that over so next week we improve, or next time we're in a similar situation, we know what didn't work, and now we can focus on things that will work.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, this is just kind of jumping around because, we were going to close off with this point, but I think it makes sense to talk about it now, is like, one of the best traits that you can have as a client is to be coachable and to have an open mind. So using that growth mindset example, focusing on everything that you're doing as a learning experience and focusing on the fact that there are no failures. You cannot fail if you learn from every mistake that you make. You can absolutely make mistakes, and you will make mistakes. That's the whole point of hiring a coach, to help you correct those. But if you keep an open mind and are able to change your thought patterns, change your behavior, and a lot of that stuff is easier said than done, but if you just keep an open mindset towards it, that is how to be the best client possible, because you'll be able to literally transform inside and out, as long as you do have someone who's knowledgeable and caring to guide you through the process.
Definitely. And I love what you said about being coachable, because I think that is such a good characteristic of a good client, because you reached out to a coach because what you're currently doing is not working. But I understand, because it's like, well, it's not working, but I'm also like, it could be worse, kind of thing. And so when you give them suggestions like, hey, this isn't working, so maybe let's try this, but they're not open to it and they don't want to try anything because it's new and you don't know what's going to happen. And so I have a lot of this happen with clients who want to lose weight. And so, Marissa and I always do the same thing, like, hey, let's reverse diet, let's implement some food. Like, you're going to the gym 7 days a week and doing an hour of cardio every single day. Like, you need to pull back. And so a lot of females are very hesitant to that. And so I have some clients who will almost kind of fight me on it and not trust the process. And, I understand that you shouldn't just follow everything that your coach does blindly without asking some questions or trying to figure out why we're doing this. But if they're not willing to do anything, well, then there's nothing we can do as a coach. There's nothing we can do if you're not willing to change and try new things. So I love the idea of being coachable.
Yeah, well, it's like, what did you hire a coach for in the first place if you weren't
Mhm.
willing to do anything about, and get out of your comfort zone, right? And I
Right.
think I think that's huge, and especially when it comes to that aspect of trust. Of course, you shouldn't blindly trust someone, but when you hire someone, like, usually you've interviewed them, usually you've engaged with their content in some form. So like there is already some trust built up. And then, of course, it's the job of the coach to implement protocols that are going to help to build that rapport and build that trust. But ultimately, there has to be a certain amount of letting go and understanding that the reason why it's hard and it's different is because it is what's going to change you for the better in most circumstances. But with our industry nowadays, I feel like we do have a good amount of good coaches in the industry. Of course, there are still bad ones, but like, I think overall, the amount of knowledge that people have as online coaches has grown and has evolved and gotten better. So most of the time, you should run into someone who is going to help you to get better rather than worse. And so, yeah, I mean, I can't even speak to that enough. Like, and it's really frustrating too when someone isn't giving you that trust or is doubting the program or the protocol for no good reason other than, they're claiming that they're the expert of their own body, which is very, very true. Your client knows themselves the best, but it's the balance of finding, okay, well, you know yourself the best. So the coach should ask, what is realistic between, what is good for you and what is out of your comfort zone that we can push towards and actually figure out what's going to be a good change that's going to put you in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't feel like I have anything else to add to being coachable.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe another thing that clients think is quote unquote good behavior is not being a burden. And unfortunately, I run into this so much more than I would like. But it's the text message starts with, I'm really sorry for bothering you, but, or the email in the middle of the week starts with, I'm really sorry for, being a burden, but I have this issue that's come up and da 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 da, or I hurt myself or whatever. And the worst part about this is like, it's always a legitimate issue. when someone is reaching out about stuff like this. Like, for example, the
Yeah.
IUD, right? Like, I'm hunched over in pain at like a 10 out of 10, and I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I'm really sorry for bothering you, but like, I'm having an emergency. Like, it's it's like almost comical, because it's like that's exactly what we're here for. And those emergencies are the times where we want to jump on it the most and help. But it's like it just makes me really sad, to be honest, because I wish
Yeah.
people had more self-confidence and knew their worth enough to know that they do deserve care and help and attention,
Yes.
and also they're paying for it.
Yeah. And again, I think, and we've touched on this before, I think there's a really big difference between not bothering your coach, but asking your coach questions that you should be able to figure out on your own. And of course, it's like, you hired a coach to be able to help you and give you answers, but there's definitely a little bit of client responsibility to do some things on your own. So, one of the things that can be kind of frustrating as a coach is like me personally, and well, Marissa too, is we have welcome packets. And this is like all the information that you could possibly need, like when you check in, how you check in, what to record, like our food philosophy, like all of this information. So we work really hard on these packets and we give them out. And it can be frustrating when you have a client who doesn't read those initial resources and documents. And so they ask you questions that are found in those documents. Which is again, it's like it's frustrating because we here are the answers that you need. And or if you have someone who is like, hey, I have 10 grams left of protein to hit today. Like, what should I eat? Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can kind of understand in the beginning, but or like, hey, what, I don't know, what's a carb? And it's like, well, all of that is explained. Or there are some times where I'll have clients who ask me questions and I'm like, hey, that's a really good question for the Facebook group. How about you ask it in there? Because not only are you going to get a response from me, but you're going to get a response from other clients. So I had a couple recently, it's like, hey, I'm having trouble hitting my fiber. Like, what are some good foods that you guys have? And so our list was like huge. Like by the time I got in, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even need to answer this. Like all of these responses are so good. But I think that there's a really big difference between having something that is urgent, that needs a response and that you can go ahead and ask, and then just something that's, I don't know, or I think what was I don't know, another client, or it's like, hey, like what deodorant should I use? And I know we brought it up
Oh yeah.
before, but it's like, I don't know.
I mean, that's not like pressed for time, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. And I think, there is a lot of times, or not a lot of times, but like a couple of times I've actually had the experience where someone was having issues with their programming, and they actually like did not reach out about the fact that it was causing issues, or didn't bring up the fact that they were having an ache or a pain, or even like I missed out on a detail that I should have updated, right? But like
Hmm.
that person did not want to be a burden, and tell me, hey, like you missed this, or like, should this really be like, should my protocol read this, or was this a mistake? And kind of calling me out in a way. And it was all for the sake of not being a burden, because I'm really busy. And I understand where that comes from, because of the energy that I've put out in the past 6 months. I am dealing with a lot. I do handle a lot, but ultimately my clients always come first.
Definitely.
My work does like career comes before school in most
Mhm.
circumstances, and like that's not most people's list of priorities, but like my job is my baby, it's my livelihood, and the master's program is adding to that. But like, just because I have all this stuff going on doesn't mean that I'm not here to answer questions. So I understand where that comes from, but at the same time, like, again, these people are paying us good money, and a lot of times getting out of their comfort zone to pay us good money in order to have our attention, time, and critique, right? So bring up everything possible that comes through your mind throughout the week and take advantage of the time that you've paid for.
Right.
And I always encourage people, get the most out of this money that you've spent. Like, not to think about your coaching experience as a transaction, but like think about it as you've invested monetarily. Now invest, emotionally, or invest with your energy and your time and your effort, right? And so I think that whole concept of being a burden is kind of faulty in a way, because it's like, well, you paid so that you are not a burden. I would get it if someone was asking for free information online. That is a burden. I don't like that. But like that's not what coaching is.
I'm just imagining someone DMing Marissa. Her response is, "You are a burden." Yeah, and that's what I tell my clients when I'm doing my initial consultation calls. It's like, if you are paying me, I work for you. So you
Mhm.
need to get the most out of me. And if you, and we've talked about this before in a lot of things, like I want my clients to ask me questions. I want them to show that they're eager to learn and they want to really learn how to do things and how to make this a lifestyle. So it's like, yeah, if you want to ask me questions, like absolutely, that's what I'm here for. Because it's not that it's boring as a coach to just be like, oh, good job this week, like keep it up. But it's like we like helping, and that's why we do what we do. So if you have questions, like ask away. That's what we're here for. And again, it's like it's really fun when you have someone who is showing that eagerness to learn. It's like it's not that you invest more time into that client, but it's like a different feeling than you have when someone's just like, here are my check-ins, like see you next week. It's like you're not able to really build any sort of relationship with them, and you don't really have a clear picture of what's going on in their lives. So when you have that person who is like, hey, like I even like when, like some coaches I've heard that they're like, you only send me the necessary like information and that's it. Anything else is disrespectful. And I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I get it. Like, you need to be efficient with your time, but like, I want to know how your first Mother's Day was. Like, tell me how it went. Like, you went out on date night. Like, tell me how it went. Like, I want to know those things. And it's like, hey, you applied for a job. Like, I'll be like, hey, did you get the job? Because I want to know and I'm invested in that. So it's like, give us that information. We like it. We like knowing who you are as a person outside of this coaching relationship as well.
Oh yeah, and I think it just goes back to like our philosophy as coaches of, okay, well, if we're going to make this truly sustainable, then you have to know how to navigate not just the situations that are easy, like the good weeks, right, where you do turn
Mhm.
in quote unquote a good report card, and everything was perfect, and you were comfortable in your routine, and everything went well, hit your macros, got your workouts in. Cool, cool, cool. We like those weeks. Those are great weeks to make progress. But ultimately, if this is going to be sustainable, it's about knowing what to do and what you can handle and make progress with on the bad weeks.
Yeah.
And the really, really tough weeks where you don't have motivation or you did have an emergency come up, how do you handle those? That is where, this lifestyle becomes truly sustainable. Because, and I think one of my clients actually brought up a really good analogy. She's a student, a doctoral in therapy, or in psychology, sorry, being a therapist student. And she brought up the concept of red light, yellow light, green light days. And so this was essentially like, if you are having a green light day, everything is good, you're in your routine, like nothing's wrong. So like you could pretty much do everything. So like you list out what are the things that you could do on your green light days. It might be hit your macros, do your workouts, everything's on point. On a yellow light day, maybe you're just struggling a little bit with motivation, or like your schedule got mixed around. So what can you do on those days? Like what is the most you can handle on that day, or what is the minimum you can take on, right? And that might be, okay, well, maybe I won't be able to make it to the gym in that situation, but maybe I'll just make sure my nutrition is good. And then the red light days, maybe you're just having an awful mental health day, or maybe you just like had a true emergency come up and like everything is in shambles and it's the worst day ever. What can you handle that day? And maybe the answer to that question is drink half your body weight in ounces of water, right? And that's it, nothing else. But like you have those 3 different days. And so I kind of lost my train of thought with this, but like where I'm supposed to wrap this back. But ultimately, like when making it sustainable. So, you have those different systems so that you can continue stepping forward no matter what's thrown at you. And that's where the role of the coach comes in. And that's where kind of our philosophy lies. So when we're saying, we want to help, it's because the end goal of where we want you to get as a listener, as a client, as someone who's just trying to live a healthier lifestyle is you have to know how you're going to handle every situation, not just the easy ones where you're, green light days.
Yeah. And so similarly, I had a client who I just referenced with like the dog and the kids in and out of like the ER and the vet. So she was like, knowing that I had to check in with you gave me that accountability instead of having like a fuck it week and just doing whatever and eating whatever. I still try to make decent decisions, and it's not perfect, but she recognized that her mentality handling all that was a little bit better and it was improved. And so the other thing she came to realize was I cannot continue to handle events like this and emergencies that come up in this way. Otherwise, like, because again, life happens where, unexpected things come up. She's like, I'm not going to be able to reach my goals if I always just go to the drive-through and get fast food and just like let my emotions control me. So again, it's like she was making progress even if she didn't hit her protocol. So those are things again that we can point out as a coach. And it's like, okay, let's continue to build off this momentum. What are things that we can do in the future? Like, all of those things. So, to wrap things up is like, to be a good client, like sometimes you think that not letting us know what's going on is better, or like skipping a check-in week and redoing when things do go better. That's actually when I feel like the most progress can be made and how we can help the most as coaches.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I got nothing else on that.
Yeah. So another kind of thing that we brought up, a point for what clients sometimes think is good behavior, is ghosting if they need to quit. Like if something happens, something comes up, or they feel like they're failing, they're not doing good enough, and they just don't check in. They don't say anything. And sometimes Marissa and I will be like, hey, like haven't heard from you in a while. Like everything okay? And just crickets. And we don't hear from them. And we like never would, that's a client we no longer have because they just stop responding. So I can understand, because I have absolutely been there myself and am currently kind of in that situation, which I think might be good to bring up. I haven't checked in with my coach. And a lot of it comes from, again, I think it's because of my prep mentality and my prep goggles and having super unrealistic expectations for myself and what I am supposed to, like, I guess what I think I'm supposed to be at for a competitor. And if I'm not there, then therefore I'm embarrassed and I don't want to check in. And Marissa and I have these conversations. We're making this post right now, but me struggling currently, like I am going through all of that you guys go through as well. So I understand and I recognize, and like, but I still struggle with it personally. So I think it's ironic we're making this whole podcast on how to be a good client, and I am not being a good client myself, but I go through and I play the comparison game, and I see other competitors who are still shredded after their shows, and they are able to reverse diet like so well, and it feels like they have no issues and it's super easy for them. And I like am embarrassed because I'm like, well, I'm up 15 pounds. And I am like, I have Marissa to like ground me, and she's like, this is the best reverse you have ever done. Like you are holding your fat, like you're distributing it very evenly, and like you're able to maintain like your current physique with higher numbers and all these things, but it's still really hard for me to get out of my head. Well, I understand, and I've been there too.
Yeah. I mean, in all seriousness, like to just hype you up a little bit. Like seriously, like your numbers right now, I'm not going to just like tell everyone your macros, but like you're eating more than I think I ever have been able to maintain on in my off season. And I'm like, I don't know, 15, 20 pounds heavier than you. And like, again, you know, your body composition, yeah, you're not shredded, but like you have to compare you versus you, because off season to off season, like this is the best you have ever done. And I think luckily you've had me for accountability, even if you haven't checked in, and have kind of been checking in with me a little bit just to like keep yourself grounded in that way. And I do think that that's helped, because, you know, you have held it really, really tight. And 15 pounds above stage weight, just for anyone listening who might be a competitor or interested in competing, is not far away from stage weight. I sit 25 above my stage weight, and most women will sit anywhere from like 20 to 30 at like a healthy body comp. Just saying, that's not that high. But on the topic of ghosting, because I think when, you know, you still consider yourself a client of Paul's, and I kind of wanted to take this in a little bit of a different direction, I think, with because unfortunately it happens where we do just lose people completely. And it makes me very, very sad, because there is so much guilt and shame involved in that. And it's like, I totally understand where that's coming from. It's like someone maybe was on a roll. And here's the thing too, the people that ghost are not the ones that struggled the whole time through. They're the ones that like started really strong and had like 4, 5, 6 good weeks. We're making amazing progress. And then, I don't know, the holidays rolled around, or like one bad week happened. And then like, boom, that person's off the radar, never hearing from them again, because they went so far in one direction that anything deviating from that is immediately a failure. And it brings up a lot of feelings of shame and guilt, and maybe past experiences that they've had that were much more negative. But a good coach, and this goes back to episode 12, which I cannot believe is like over 12 more episodes ago, what, like 15, 16 episodes ago now. And, you know, that goes back to that episode of when we talked about good coaches don't put you down for making mistakes or even completely falling off the wagon, because our job is to pull you back up. And so it makes me really sad when that does happen, because unfortunately that's a reality of coaching. And it's like, damn, like this person invested money in me, invested time, invested effort, and trusted me. And here they are just leaving that all here, and I can't get a hold of them. You know, I've reached out to, you know, their email, their cell phone, like, and it like for some of the people that I have quote unquote lost, I will still try to check in with them about once a month still, because I do honor, you know, hey, if you've paid and you ghost, I will keep that as credit for you for the next year. And, you know, if they're able to redeem that within the year, I am happy to have them back. But like, yeah, it just breaks my heart.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like, I know Paul, and he is not going to like berate me or tell me that I'm being an awful client. Like he responded to my last check-in where I said like, hey, I'm sorry, I haven't been checking in very frequently, but like, here's my current, you know, stuff. And he was like, I get it. He was like, I get it, because when you're in your off season, you're not seeing that progress week to week. You know, you're not eager for like your next, you know, next week's protocols. And, you know, it's easy because you're seeing win after win after win, because usually when you're not in a dieting phase, you're losing weight. He was like, it's easy to not want to check in because you're like, oh, well, I'll have a better check in next week. And then that turns into, well, I'll just do another week. And he was like, I get it. I understand. And he was like, you're looking really good. And he was like, just, you know, keep checking in. And so again, it was me and my mentality of feeling embarrassed and not feeling like a good enough client to like check in. Like that's on me. It has nothing to do with him. And like he's super supportive and gets it. So it's just me getting over my shit and checking in with him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like there are times where we need to communicate, like if something isn't working, instead of ghosting or just quitting altogether. Something that is really good behavior, quote unquote behavior, I guess, I don't know, I feel like I'm talking about pets when I say the word behavior, but like something that is good to do as a client is to complain to the coach. And I say that, and I'm not saying like just whine and bitch and like start like just being a total drag, but like when something is not right, bring it to the coach. And I've had a couple of experiences with this recently where like I've heard from a third party that someone was dissatisfied with something that I had done. And, I had to address it in some way that didn't throw that person under the bus. But then, like, it just made the whole situation awkward. Whereas if I was confronted with that directly, then I would be, more than happy to adjust something, do more. Because ultimately, it's like on my end, I want to do everything that I can to leave this person with a good experience of the service of my coaching. And I hold myself to an extremely high standard. So if I am not meeting that from someone's eyes, then, I am willing to do more to change that. Ultimately, but I can only work with what information I have. And so if you have something that comes up or you're not happy with a certain plan or workout or diet protocol, that is ultimately up to you to bring that to the forefront. And you're not going to be met with resistance in most circumstances unless it's like really something that you have to do. But ultimately, this journey is custom. It's not, here's your workout program that I also gave to 10 other people. You have to do it exactly like this. I built this from the ground up for you. So if something is not working and it's not something that fits what you wanted, please tell me. And so that really frustrates me. And I just really want to encourage you, anyone who's listening, if you're my client, if you're someone who, has hired a coach, bring your issues to the forefront.
Yeah. And I had a similar situation with a client a couple years ago who didn't like how things were going, but didn't want to tell me that in fear of maybe like hurting my feelings. And I kind of think that sometimes having a coach is like being in a relationship where it's like you can fester all your resentment and let it build up. And then all of a sudden you're going to blow up and just say, this isn't working. I need to quit. And then as a coach, we're like, well, why? What happened? Like, what was wrong? Like, I thought everything was going well.
Totally blindsided.
And we're blindsided. And so if you have a client who's like, hey coach, like, you said that you were going to do this and you didn't, and you're like, oh my gosh, you were totally right. Like, thank you for letting me know, or thank you for reminding me, like, I'll do that right away. Or like, hey coach, like I am not liking this workout split. Like, is there anything I can do differently? And so, yeah, kind of like what we were saying before, if I have some clients who will be like, hey, do I get another set of workouts next week? And I'll be like, no. And let me explain why. So instead of having a fresh new workout every single week, like we're trying to focus on progressive overload. And if we are doing new workouts every week, then we're not able to progress on certain exercises. We're not able to really get stronger because we're constantly doing new things. And they might be like, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know. Instead of 8 weeks and being like, I'm so bored of these workouts, like it sucks. I don't understand the purpose of why I'm doing these, why they're not changing. So that's a very different conversation. So if you were able to kind of like nip that like week 1 instead of week 8, it's a lot easier on your coach and they can give you some information, maybe explain why they're doing something. Or if you're like, hey, this isn't working, we'll be like, okay, let's try to find something else that works for you. So communicate your issues. That is like, I would say probably number one is like communication. I'd say that is like the number one good quality of the client.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it just all goes back to like, we are willing to adapt. Like there are obviously principles that don't change. Like, for example, if you want to build muscle, you need to eat a high protein diet. But how you do that and how high of a protein diet it is, maybe we can help you lower that protein intake a little bit and you can get by with the bare minimum. If it's really, really a struggle, or maybe you really I have plenty of clients who say like they're really picky with like meat and like they just don't really like meat sources. And so first, maybe it's like, is it the way that you're cooking it? Is it the way that, you prepare it? Is it too dry? Is it not seasoned? Okay, well, if you're seasoning it well, you're putting the effort in to cook, you still don't like it. Okay, what are some other sources we can use? And then, okay, is it still too much? How are you spacing it throughout the day? Are you neglecting protein all day long and then having to eat 100 grams right before bed? Yeah, that
Oh,
sounds super displeasing. No wonder you hate protein. Like, let's try to space that out better. Or are you doing all of those things and it's still just dissatisfying to you? Then we reach the discussion of, okay, maybe you do need to just suck it up and do it if your goals are that important to you, or maybe we can dial it back a little if it's not that urgent, but we have to come to that discussion and conclusion together, right? And so, yeah, a lot of it is just good communication.
yeah. So the other thing too, it's like, I have some clients who I can understand because it's like, yeah, there are some non-negotiables. It's like you are gonna have to get up and walk around and get some steps in during the day. They don't need to be 20,000, but we need to have like a okay step count. And like if we want to diet, then we probably need to be in a deficit. And like you're gonna have to work out a few times. It doesn't have to be super intense. It could just be like 2 to 3 like 30-minute workouts a week. And if that's only the only thing that works with your schedule, then yeah, we'll adapt to that. But there are some things that you're going to have to do. But there are ways that we can work around things and work for you and your lifestyle and your schedule.
Yeah, and I think that
Find
just
what works best for you.
if you don't understand that inside joke, Christina says that a lot, and we make fun of it.
Because it's so true, but
Well,
I
because
definitely
yeah,
overuse it.
because it is very true. But that kind of plays into like, okay, this person finds this X, Y, and Z to be a hassle, whether it's a high protein diet or maybe they just really don't like working out and they just don't like either the gym or they don't like the way that working out feels. Part of that might be remedied by knowing the purpose, like you said with that progressive overload example. That was a great one because it can be very, very boring to do the same repetition of exercises over and over again if you don't understand the fact that you're actually supposed to increase the weight every week or do more reps every week. And if you don't get that, then you don't understand how the process and progress would work. And then it's not motivating. But then if you actually understand the system of like, oh, I get better at this every week, then it becomes intrinsically motivating. But with a high protein diet, maybe you just really, really hate those specific food sources and you are that picky. Or like maybe you just feel like the protocol is too much for what you're willing to do. And I think this is where we address, okay, well, what are you willing to do? And how much effort are you actually willing to put into this? And I think this is where the whole question of like, should you hire a coach comes into the question, because it's like, if you are not willing to put in the effort for the results that you want, or the results that you want are not worthwhile enough, or they're not urgent enough that you're willing to put in extra effort, then we need to assess the question of, are you even ready for change?
Right.
Like, right? Like, or are you comfortable? Right. And
Right.
the reason why people hire coaches is to get uncomfortable and to do more than they were doing before. And so you have to really get deep with yourself in that question of, am I actually ready for change? Like, can I make these changes to my lifestyle and be okay with it maybe for a temporary period of time? Or am I willing to even shift my mindset about something? And that's a hard question to answer. But ultimately, like, that's something that you should tackle from day one head on, because if you don't come to the realization that you're ready for change or not ready for change, then how is that coaching relationship going to go? We might have, all these behaviors like ghosting or skipping check-ins, or just, not really putting your all into it because of that lack of willingness to change or put effort in.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to add to that. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So I don't know, I guess we can just, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit throughout the podcast, but some kind of like bad behaviors. I mentioned earlier, like not reading through like resources and documents. And so asking questions that can be found in those documents. That can be really frustrating again, because you spend a lot of time on all your protocols and resources. And we just touched on the lack of effort, that's really frustrating. And again, there's a big difference between having a lot of like real life stuff come up and there's no way that you could have gotten in a workout, or there's no way that you could have hit your macros. But if you are just not trying and you're really not giving any sort of effort, that can be a bad behavior. And also, I think expecting results every week or having unrealistic expectations. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad behavior. And I think that you can, as a coach, kind of combat that in the early stages and let them know what is good results and like what to expect if you're in a fat loss phase. And so, this is something that, again, that I've learned over time to let clients know, because I'll have clients that'll be like, I only lost 1.5 pounds this week. I'm not losing weight fast enough. And I have to let them know, like, this is great. This is amazing. Like, if we are losing too fast, you're actually pulling in, we're losing muscle mass, and you might end up looking skinny fat. And that's not what we want. Like, slow, sustainable change is going to be like the most healthy in the long run. And so explaining those things ahead of time, I think really helps with those expectations. And so one of the things I touch on too with my clients is like, hey, let's take a look at your average weight. Like, let's see how that's trending down. And or with reverse dieting, I think that sometimes we've talked about in certain podcasts that the social media is like, oh, if you reverse diet, like you will just lose weight. And like, so when they're like, I'm gaining weight, I don't know why. Am I doing something wrong? So again, setting those expectations in the beginning that you could lose weight, you could maintain, or you could gain weight. And it's like letting them know ahead of time. And so they're not having this like, well, you're being a bad coach.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of these themes that we've recently touched on is, you know, the expectations piece, the lack of effort. You have to know too, is it the right time to be doing this? Like, or is there just too much going on? Right. And so I've had people, I can think of one client in particular who started with me and we had our first call, and she was super excited. And, she had some experience with lifting weights. She had kind of counted her macros before. So I was like, this is going to be great. Like, the learning curve is going to be short. She's going to be ready to go. She's going to crush it. And then she had like clinicals on clinicals, and she worked a full-time job, and she's a medical student. And so she was commuting 2 hours from one place to the other. She was working 7 days per week. She was working 12-hour shifts. She was barely getting any time off. And the time that she was getting off, she wanted to spend with her boyfriend. And I kept bringing it up because I was like, I honestly just don't think this is the right time. I think, and the protocols and her, performance with things reflected it. Her head wasn't in it. She wasn't putting in the effort. And there was really no like intention behind any of the things that she was doing. And so I was just like, I just don't think that this is the right time for what we want to do, what you want to do right now. Like, it doesn't seem to me like your goals of fat loss or your goals of getting this really rigid schedule together are really all that worth it, or they just don't fit what time frame we're in right now in your life. And that's okay. That's something that you need to come to terms with. And in that circumstance, maybe the right move is to pause your contract and get back on it in 6 months when you've graduated and you're working less, right? And so that was a really difficult conversation to have. And I feel like I did bring it up a number of times before I really did get through about it. But, know when it's the right time to put in more effort. Or, if you are persistent on pursuing that coaching relationship and you do think it is the best thing for you to have that accountability, then to be really realistic with what it is you're going to be able to achieve. So, match your level of effort that you're willing to give with the actual amount of time that you have to give effort towards, and availability and resources, not only in your time but in your energy, emotionally and physically.
Yeah. And so to build off of that, I think that there's a difference between you are doing so much that there is no way that you can give any of your energy into anything else and to pick up something else. But at the same time, like if you're like, oh, well, I'm going on vacation, or I have a friend's wedding coming up, or I have this and that, it's like there are always going to be events. There are always going to be weddings. There are always going to be vacations. There's always going to be things that come up, and dinners and happy hours. And so again, part of our coaching is to help you navigate these situations and attack them in a healthier manner so they don't derail your progress. And so if you always have this idea in your head that there's always something, then you're never going to have time to actually work on it. So that is also some of the things. And I think that when I'm having these initial, usually when someone has a consultation call, they're kind of already in that like, oh, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this mindset shift. But if you have someone who is like, well, I just don't know if it's at the right time, that's kind of like maybe your first challenge as a coach is to let them know like, hey, like there's always going to be stuff. And it's kind of like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. So I think that again, there's a big difference between it literally not being the right time and there's nothing that you can physically or mentally take on to like, am I making an excuse? And
Oh
is it
yeah.
something that I don't want to do? And do I need to put forth additional effort to figure out how to tackle these situations?
Yeah, for sure. I think you definitely countered that really well, because one of the biggest traps that people fall into with starting is, oh, well, it's not the right time. It's not the right time. It's not the right time. But do not use that as a crutch. There are very few circumstances where I do say like, hey, this isn't the right time. And those are those very extreme circumstances where like you cannot add anything more to your plate, or you will literally go insane, or, the priority is just not there. But if it is a priority to you and you're just kind of nervous to start, that is absolutely right. Don't use it as an excuse or a crutch to just push it off later and later, because you're never going to start if you
Right.
keep doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, we really did kind of hit on a few things a number of times, communication as a big one, our role as coaches, and how like we want to help in every way we possibly can, how this lifestyle is about navigating all the situations, not just the ones where you're in your routine and you're in your comfort zone. Anyone can be on their shit and be super fit and healthy when nothing's going on and they're just eating from home all the time and they have nothing coming up. But that's not how life works, right? And so our role as coaches and our philosophy, specifically Christina and I as coaches, is to help you to actually navigate those situations and bring down the barriers to, oh well, I was at this wedding and I fell completely off track, or I went out to dinner and I just couldn't help myself. And like it's tackling those situations, and the theme that there is nothing there. Oh, the words are hard. There is no such thing as a failure, only a learning experience. And we touched on this a little bit 2 episodes ago with the growth mindset and balance podcast, but touching on it even more when it comes to checking in, being accountable, and being a good client. Having an open mind to the fact that you are not a failure, and the way that you talk to yourself does matter. And you can grow from every single mistake or situation that you maybe didn't handle perfectly. And if you come into a coaching relationship with that mindset, or even just your own fitness journey with that mindset, maybe you don't have a coach, maybe you just have a friend that's a sounding board, or maybe you're just listening to this and this is your coaching advice. You can look at every situation as a learning experience rather than a failure or just a mistake. Build off of it and flip the script and see what you can do better next time around. Because really, this is my favorite line lately with clients, is the only way you could truly fail is if you gave up.
Yeah.
And then I follow that up with, I know you're not going to give up, but but yeah, so you really can't fail if you keep getting back up.
Yeah. And I think too that a lot of clients that I have will come to me and they're like, oh, I want to lose weight or I want to do this. And they're like, I'm like, okay, yeah. And we start our coaching experience and maybe a month or two in, they're like, Christina, like I thought this was just going to be like macros and workouts, but like you have changed my life. Like you have changed my mindset. You've changed my outlook. And she's like, I've had one client in particular that I'm thinking of is like, my confidence is like skyrocketed. Like I am improving in like all areas of my life. Like I got a promotion at my job. Like my relationship is improving, like all of these things in it. Cause I think that what happens and a lot of times we've talked about this with prep is when you're able to overcome things and when you're able to do hard things and realize that you can do them, you change as a person and you change and you start to think, well, if I'm capable of this, like what else am I capable of? And so coaching is not just macros and training, that we're here to help you through a lot of different areas of life. And we might just be fitness coaches, but a lot of times we are therapists, we are counselors. Like we kind of take on that role. And granted, like there are times where like, hey, you need to outsource, you need to see someone else. But we're there for you in a lot of different ways, and we attack the mentality. And so I like when you were talking about growth mindset, that we absolutely do touch on how you talk to yourself and how you perceive things and what you can do in the future and how that carries over into just so many different areas of your life.
But yeah, I called out a client literally just before this because she was like, she said something in her video along the lines of, oh, well, I'm not good at getting to the gym. And so I said, hey, if you tell yourself that you're not good at getting to the gym, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be bad about it. So
Yeah.
flip the script. Let's talk about, hey, I am a gym goer now. Let's
Mhm.
identify that way and see how your actions follow, because your
Mhm.
behaviors follow your actions. And I bet we could probably come up with a whole episode about self-talk and behavior.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, so like seriously, it's just incredible what we're able to do. I mean, you're exactly right when, it's not just we changed your body, it's we changed your mind, we changed your life. And we really can step into the role of like a life coach sometimes, and like
Mhm.
unintentionally, but just through the empowerment that comes with learning that you actually do have control over your outcomes. I think a
Mhm.
lot of us too often fall into the victim mindset of we are in our circumstance and we cannot change it and we are who we are and that is stagnant. But once you start to take control of your diet, your exercise, you realize how much control you actually have over things, and it just bleeds into everything else that you do.
Yeah.
And you made me think of one client who actually, and she'll be so embarrassed if I named her, so I won't. But she emailed me like I think she was drunk or like tipsy on a Friday night, and I just get this email in my inbox. For some reason, I just opened my Gmail on a Friday night. Like that's my life, guys. But I opened it and she said something along the lines of like, I'm talking to my friends about you right now, and it's just so cool how empowering this experience is. Thank you so much. And that was the whole email. And it
That
like
would make me cry.
it almost brought me to tears. Like I was just like, holy shit. I think the only thing that kept me from crying was like, it's 11 p.m. on a Friday night. She's definitely tipsy. And so I could kind of laugh a little bit, but yeah, absolutely like unforgettable email experience.
Oh, well, I feel like that's such a good, happy note to end on.
Yeah.
But also, just for anyone who's curious, I have pulled up my email and I have my email ready to go to Paul because I'm going to check in. So
Yes.
I feel super called out. But I did take check-in pictures, and I still am like logging my weight and doing all this stuff. But just to for anyone curious, I'm gonna go check in. So maybe next episode I'll let you guys know his response and what happened.
Episode 28, we're going to get a check-in update from Christina and verify that she did in fact hit send.
Yes, yes. So stay tuned.
Proud of you.
Awesome. Well, I think this was a really good episode. And again, how to be a good client. So, number one thing is just communicate, let us know what's going on, and don't skip check ins. And really, the only way that you can fail is by giving up. So, we hope that you enjoy this episode. And if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And you can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Chrissy Lynn Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening. And we hope to see you back next week.